This is the RAWRR. Excuse me. This is the RAWRR. This is the RAWRR MANTIS, and it is one of the newest, highly anticipated, lightweight electric dirt bikes. The MANTIS has a 72 volt, 35 amp hour battery, giving the bike 7.5 kilowatts of peak power, with a nominal power of 5 kilowatts. Similar to most bikes in this genre, the bike features a KKE fork. The difference is that this fork is slightly longer and it features stiffer steel internals, as opposed to the aluminum that we're used to seeing from KKE. The rear shock is also KKE, but you can see that it does not have a linkage, and therefore is a direct mount to the swing arm. It's got your standard 19-inch front and rear wheel set, but it features tires with a more aggressive tread pattern than what we're used to seeing on these bikes. The MANTIS comes with a direct mount bar clamp that has an optional riser and multiple fore and aft mounting positions. It's also got this mount for attaching devices like a phone or GPS to your bike. The MANTIS weighs in at 165 pounds with a current MSRP of $4,999. Before we start the ride, I want to point out something that may be easily overlooked. I don't typically like to film unboxings, but after having opened my fair share of bike boxes over the years, I have to say that the MANTIS arrived in the most secure and organized package that I've seen. The bike comes with a detailed manual explaining how to assemble it, and even a toolbox to help facilitate that. So for those of you receiving your bikes via freight, a tip of the hat to RAWRR for their attention to detail on packaging. All right, first ride on the RAWRR MANTIS. You just got to turn the key on here. Your display will light up, and then you're ready to go. You've got sport and eco mode. We are going to run it in sport. And that's about it. Just twist the throttle and go. One of the first things I noticed about the MANTIS is its acceleration. I'm not calling it fast, but it does seem to have more pep at the crack of the throttle than other bikes in this weight class. As we mentioned, the MANTIS is putting out 7.5 kilowatts of peak power, and it's getting that from a 72 volt battery, whereas most bikes in this category are 60 volt. The MANTIS utilizes a geared transmission, which RAWRR claims to be more efficient as opposed to a jack shaft with a belt drive, both of which could contribute to the feel of added acceleration. Struggling to get up this right here. Woo! The next thing I notice is that this fork feels stout. When it comes to the suspension, this is the stiffest mountain bike style fork that I've ridden from KKE, and that's a good thing. It feels more robust than other bikes in this department, and that is welcomed. The shock, however, seems to suffer from exactly what you would expect from a linkageless shock design. It has a tendency to kick, and it feels unsettled in repeated choppy terrain. It's the same characteristic that everyone complained about with the early KTM PDS style shock. We can confirm that the EXT Arma shock fits this bike, although beware that there are some slight modifications that need to be made to the eyelet to fit the MANTIS. Furthermore, the motor sits noticeably toward the rear of the bike. RAWRR designed the MANTIS to have the battery in front of the motor, which they claim improves overall stability, durability, and it also helped to decrease the seat height. While we're on the topic, the swing arm design and angle seems pretty unusual. It appears to be more of a stylistic decision, keeping in line with the Praying Mantis theme, but it caught our attention. The pivot point for the swing arm also seems to be rearward biased. All of this could have some contribution to the way the rear of the bike feels, but the point is, we did notice it. In the ergonomics department, wouldn't you guess it, it's low in the front. Even despite the longer fork, the bike still has a bit of a stink bug effect. That effect may be heightened because of the step-down seat, but it has the feeling of a low front end. Not gonna lie, the seat kind of feels wrong to me. This step down in the front feels the opposite of what I'd want. This feels kind of unusual. I feel like this should be flat or even have a step up instead of a step down. We did notice that RAWRR is now selling an aftermarket flat seat, so it appears to be a concern that they quickly responded to. As we say with a lot of these bikes, a 21-inch front wheel option would likely help some of that feeling. All in all, this bike definitely sits taller than the competitors, and when paired with the provided bar risers, the bike actually feels like it was sized for an adult. Back to the seat. They do have a pretty slick design for opening the battery compartment. You just push a button and the seat pops right open. I happen to like that design. However, there's one glaring problem with it. You need to have power to actuate it. So if you pull your battery out to charge it, or generally have the battery disconnected, and then you bump the seat lid, which I had done on numerous occasions, the lid shuts and the button will no longer open the lid. There is a solution though, and it's this little key right here. You push this into an opening hidden behind the battery and in front of the shock, and it'll pop open. Nice to have a solution, but I could see this becoming a headache. Brakes are pretty bad. The brakes may be one of the weaker points of this bike. The brakes themselves are likely adequate, but it's very hard to stop this bike. Often, upgrading the brake pads will do the trick, which is something that we would start with to get this bike to slow down better. The MANTIS has full-size fenders, which is a bonus point for keeping the mud and debris down, but it may have some impact on style points, the latter being something that is rightfully up for debate. In terms of design, these bars on the side of the bike make it really convenient to grab a hold of the rear end and move the bike, or get the rear of the bike turned around completely if needed, when you're not using reverse. So I'm just stopped right now, needing to turn here, and this is one thing I'm feeling for sure is the steer lock turning radius feels pretty narrow on this bike. Impressed with the fork though. I'm not putting it in the category of the aftermarket forks, but for a stock fork, it's the best I've ridden out of these lightweight bikes. All right guys, just finishing up my ride on the RAWRR MANTIS. Overall first impressions are pretty good. It's actually nicely sized. It's quite a bit bigger than some of the other bikes in this category, so that's a nice feature. I think the fork is one of the best that I've felt out of a stock bike. I can usually hardly tolerate the stock fork on a lot of these bikes. This fork feels better to me than those. Sizing wise, the bike feels like an adult size bike, even though it's still in play bike form. I like that it comes with bar risers. I like that it has different positions for the fore and aft part of the handlebars. Power feels good for a stock bike. I would still like some more, but wouldn't we all? The seat feels a little weird to me. I don't like that step down seat. Maybe that can be fixed in the aftermarket scene. I do think that it should have a 21-inch in the front. It feels kind of nervous in the front, and I would definitely replace the brakes on this bike because they feel pretty inadequate. But not a huge fan of the linkageless rear suspension there. But you know, you have to take into account that these are play bikes, and so I can often be maybe a little too critical of that. So taking all of that into account, this bike is really nice, has a lot of nice features, and seems to bring a lot to the table in stock form. So that is first impression on the RAWRR MANTIS. We're going to give it some more seat time and see how it does. Thanks for watching. See ya.